Hi everyone, it's Emily Javens, Executive Director of MAUD, here with an update. Sorry I couldn't be with you tonight, but we've been busy at MAUD and looking forward to this evening to telling you what we've been up to. My first update is about the Metro Watershed-Based Implementation Fund Program. We've been very busy working on this over the past several months. Just to recall where we were at with this last biennium that ended on June 30th. We have a map on the left of the different watershed areas that were used to divvy up the money. The eligible entities were, of course, the watersheds, the SWCDs, municipalities, and counties. As far as eligible plans, we had the watershed management plans, the One Watershed, One Plan, County Groundwater Plan, and that in the last biennium, the SWCD annual work plans, which was new with that biennium, were also allowed. The allocation areas were divided up into the 10 areas shown on the left, and the formula that we used was based on land, area, and public waters. So 90% on private land and 10% public water. The method to distribute the funds was there was a separate grant written for each project or program that was selected by the convene group, which was the watersheds, SWCD, 2 cities, and the counties. For the next biennium, which has already started, what's being proposed for how to run this program, the only changes that we'll see are the ones that are listed in red here. So the eligible entities, still the same. It's all the local governments that are in the metro, the watersheds, SWCDs, municipalities, and counties. Eligible plans taken off the list are the SWCD annual work plans, and what is added in its place is an enhanced SWCD plan. That's new this biennium. The allocation areas are 27 this time, so it's been divided into smaller units for the most part. If there was a One Watershed, One Plan written, then the money that will go to that plan, and those partners will decide how to spend that money. Now for the 3 that are listed here, the Rum, the St. Croix, and the Cannon, there will also be rural allocations that will come from the rural portion of this, but the metro, if there's small watersheds within the lower St. Croix here, they will not have individual allocations going to those watershed areas. It'll be everything going to the St. Croix. And then the remainder of the watersheds more on a Huck 8 scale will receive an allocation area. And the formula remains kind of the same, but just in the last couple of weeks, the idea came up and is going to the board that every watershed will receive a $75,000 base, and then the remainder of the money, after everybody gets at least $75,000, will be distributed on land, area, and public water. The method to distribute the funds is the same. It'll just be more convened meetings, but it'll be based on smaller watersheds. So instead of having 10 groups that will convene to decide how to divvy up the money, it'll be the 24 plus the 3 One Watershed, One plans. So they do have the funding amounts. This just came out at noon today in the Bowser board packet. If you want to see that, I do have a link to that coming up here, but you will see the 3 One Watershed, One plans at the top are getting allocations anywhere from 300 to 800,000, a little bit plus there. And then there's half a dozen or so entities that will be getting the 75,000 base, and then the rest of the entities listed there for $6.5 million. The last allocation was $6 million, so that has received a little bit of a bump. So that's good news for the metro. So some of the questions about the SWCD enhanced plans. what is actually being approved. And I may need to ask for the Bowser representatives after my presentation to clarify anything. Like I said, this just came out at noon today. So next Wednesday, when the Bowser board does meet, what is listed in the documents are several items in the board order. The two at the top, though, I did pull out. The first one is that they are going to be adopting the policy that's been drafted, and then it establishes the content and process for the SWCDs to develop enhanced plans consistent with Statute 103C. If the SWCD determines that an eligible 103B plan does not sufficiently and comprehensively include their activities. The plan content must include priorities, measurable goals, targeted implementation actions, so that PTM is in there. It will require stakeholder input, establishment of an advisory committee, a public review and comment period, a public hearing, and the Bowser board will need to approve this. Last time it was just the annual work plan, and the board, the SWCD board, would have it at their meeting, and then it would go to Bowser's staff for approval. So this is a loftier, more robust approval system. Ma did argue that this is not necessary and is redundant. Our 103B plans are sufficient and comprehensively inclusive. I have completed an analysis of all of the plans, and there were only two where it was maybe a little questionable if the plans specifically called out SWCD work. Their plan was written a little more broadly, and it was really up to the district or the water management organization to decide, exactly how and who and what and all of that, those goals would be met. But we have looked at every single plan now, and it would be surprising if someone thought that their work was not sufficiently and comprehensively included in those plans. What will the plans look like? This is where Bowser will need to give some details on this. There was a document that came out on September 8th, and that is no longer online, but there was a draft that was presented to the committee. The Bowser board will not be seeing this in October. I guess I'm not sure what the plans are, if the Bowser board will see this and approve this, or if by the board order that I just mentioned, if that was direction to give staff to write up the guidance on how SWCD plans will be approved. There's a 2-year option, a 2 to 5 year option, and a 10-year option for them to go down the road. There is, I should note, there is an existing amendment process that I think that we rallied for, and I think is the stronger option, that if the SWCD really feels like their work is contributing to water quality goals and not reflected in the watershed plan, that they can go through the amendment process where they would work with the watershed organization to say, we would really like our work included in your plan. And so then you're all familiar with that, how you do an amendment, and it would go through that process. The beauty of that idea is that we're still looking at having one plan, and the coordination is identified in one plan. And I think, and we think, that that is by far the best way to move forward long term. The idea here is to have everybody coordinated and working together and taking a look at what everybody's doing, so that we can really take a look at what needs to be done to protect and restore those water resources. And if we're just allowing plans to be based on county boundaries to decide, that's not coordinated and that's not efficient. So I guess I'm not sure how this is going to play out, but perhaps the Bowser staff that's here this evening can provide those details. So the policy that they're providing, it is listed if you want to take a look at it specifically in the board meeting packets. And I want to thank Bowser on this. I did request at after the last meeting that when policy amendments are being sent to the board, that the red lines are included. For the past several policy adjustments, we've only seen the final version of the policy in the board packet and not the red line version, so you could see what actually changed. So I appreciate that. So this is the policy that lays out what's the reason for the policy, which LGUs are eligible, what are the match requirements, and then the next section is eligible activities. And so this is a longer section than what's shown here, but it does identify the different types of plans that are allowed to be referenced when projects or programs are being selected for these funds. And so what they're adding here is they're taking out the words annual work plan and adding a Metro SWCD enhanced plan as identified in this guidance document. That I believe is that 7-page document that we've seen, but it hasn't been finalized. And again, not sure who's finalizing those guidelines. Switching gears here, an update on our legislative activity, platform, and resolutions process. The legislative committee did meet and make some recommendations about a preliminary platform that did go to the MOD Board of Directors, who then approved it as being kind of our temporary platform until we have our resolutions hearing and potentially add more items that will be weighed to see where we'll put our resources this year. So again, we're splitting this into 3 categories. We've done this every year. The first one, the biggest, what are we going to lead? What are we going to put the most effort into? And that will be, again, the levy limit for watershed districts. I will give you a quick update on that. I did testify at the Minnesota Subcommittee on Minnesota Water Policy. I suppose it's been over a month now. But that did get some good traction. And what I testified on was the need for the legislature to take a look at making sure that all local governments are able to raise revenue or have the capacity to implement these watershed plans, the One Watershed One plans or our traditional ones, to be able to implement those and have the capacity to do so without them getting in the way. So we did get some traction from some legislators on that. We did have a meeting scheduled with Representative Fisher this last Friday, a couple of days ago. He did get hung up at his day job, and we are rescheduling that. But we are going to be asking if he would be potentially willing to draft a bill for us, and if not, is there someone in the DFL in the Metro that would be willing to do this? This is largely a rural issue, but the rural legislators are not in a position with their party to be able to show or to have anything that looks like a potential tax increase, especially with the election coming up. And both bodies, the House and the Senate, will be up for re-election. But I want to feel confident that at least getting a bill written up, and Ray and I have been talking recently and came up with some additional ways that we could potentially get a levy issue addressed that maybe look a little bit different. And we're just kind of taking a look at some different creative ideas that would allow folks to raise more revenue and not be stuck at that $250,000 limit. Then category B, we always take a look at what are we going to support but not lead. And the first one this year, this is what we would call typically a bonding year. So the bonding bill will be a big area of focus. We particularly want to make sure we can maximize our flood hazard mitigation program allocations. And the reason why we say we are supporting this is the Red Board typically takes the biggest lead on this with their lobbyists, and so they'll be leading the charge on that, and we support wherever we can to make sure that we get that maximum allocation for our impoundment projects and other type of flood hazard mitigation. the issue of how you appeal the public waters designation. That is a very active topic. I will tell you that a court case just on Limbo Creek was just, we just got a ruling on that, and Renville County has, I'm not sure if they've already appealed that or if they have just indicated to the public that they will be appealing that. But that was a case where Limbo Creek, there was a section of ditch system that could have, the question was, is that a public water, a natural water body or not? It was not on the public waters inventory map, but it did meet the definition in statute about what a public water is. And that is when the point at which 2 square miles of land drains to a common point, and when that, from that point on, that water body is considered a public water. And Renville County said it wasn't on the map, it's not a public water, and MCEA, they said that it met the definition of public water, so therefore it is. The court agreed that it was a public water. So that is going to be continue to be in court for a while, but that whole instance of how that comes up and when can the DNR make changes. There are some instances in law that says they can make changes for errors, things like that, and but of course when changes are being made, that's become a hot topic. So we will be watching that and participating as is needed. The wake boat legislation, there are some bills out there on that, and we believe that's on hold right now until the University of Minnesota completes its work on the wake boat research that they are doing. So stay tuned on that. I keep hearing that any day we're going to see that research, and when that comes out, when that legislation starts to move, we will certainly be supportive where we can. And the limited liability for commercial salt applicators. I know some folks want us to take a really large, a larger lead or role in leading that. And the reason that we're not leading that is that our expertise, the need for our expertise in moving this legislation forward has already been done. The legislators do not doubt that the liability that comes with the application of salt from a commercial standpoint, it contributes to the water quality problem. They know that throwing too much salt down is definitely impairing our waters, and they know that the reason they do that is because of liability. That is a sound, people agree on that. That's where our expertise is. The piece that is still holding that up are the attorneys and the legal aspect of liability. That is not our strength, and so we will not be leading that effort, because what is needed to be done, we just don't. That's just not our expertise. So we will continue to support it as much as we can. Continue to support the education to help people understand what an appropriate amount of chloride to put down is for that. But we are kind of at the end of what we can potentially do to help move this forward. Then there's some legislation that's already been introduced that is working against watersheds or is different than how we currently operate. This list is actually a little bit longer, and I need to update this, just do a really thorough once over again of everything that got introduced. But some of the big ones here were removing the eminent domain powers for watershed districts, replacing our appointed managers with county commissioners. So our watershed district boards would be county commissioners, a collection of them rather than the appointments. And then the merger study with SWCDs and WDs, taking a look at the feasibility on that once a one watershed, one plan is approved. We'll continue to watch that and visit with legislators as needed. I think this one maybe is quiet for the time being. We certainly have made a case that it's premature. There's some other things that could be potentially studied that would have a bigger impact on governance for watershed issues, but we will keep it on the list for legislation to watch and just make sure it doesn't do harm to our members. For our administrative platform, the committee and the board have identified kind of one area with all the different agencies that would start as our priority. And sorry, I'm recording this right when the sun comes through my window here, but anyways, so with Bowser, we're going to continue to work on ensuring that when there is funding that says it's for watershed-based activities, that goes through a solid watershed-based plan. You and I know that the plans that we put together are so robust, and to not recognize that as the vehicle to send money for watershed-based implementation, to me still I just can't wrap my head around why we aren't using that vehicle, and why we're creating a new type of plan that is supposed to go through as much planning as we already go through. We know how exhaustive and exhausting those can be, and they're sufficient and adequate. So we will continue to work on that issue. With the Clean Water Council, we will be working on making sure that very large and significant portion of the Clean Water Fund that is going to watershed-based implementation, that continues to increase, while the number of One Watershed, One plans that come online also increase, so that there's a fairly predictable amount of funds that, if repeated, you would kind of have this similar amount of money coming out of the Clean Water Fund to a watershed. So, and nothing is ever guaranteed, of course, but it does give this idea that if you put in the work of planning, that the state would support us through that. For the Department of Health, it looks like some of the COVID workers are going back to some of their regular duties. As I've mentioned in previous meetings, most of the Department of Health staff got transitioned to COVID, and some of them are now coming back. And so some of the stormwater reuse issues look like they're maybe starting up again, and we want to make sure that watersheds have representation on those task force, and especially if we're setting standards, that we can be part of the conversation and recognized as an entity that really has something to add to the work. The DNR, looking at finding ways to allow temporary water storage on DNR wetlands. So the wetlands that are owned by the DNR, we're talking about those specifically. When there's major flood events, is there a way that we can temporarily store water on there? We have already started conversations, and we look forward to continuing those. The MPCA, it seems like this has maybe died down a little bit, but when the second cycle of RAPS, the watershed restoration and protection strategies, when that work comes up again, just making sure that the work that's being proposed and is being done is essential before spending clean water funds. This is particularly a concern in the metro because so many of us are already doing some of that work, and it doesn't need to be repeated. So making sure that those conversations are taking place and that the funds are being spent in the best way that they can. And this year we added a goal with the local government water roundtable, that we continue to work together with them on shared priorities and common interests. We did just have a meeting this afternoon, and maybe Sherry White will give an update also on that. But one thing, when we looked at common interests, I did approach for MAUD that there were kind of 3 areas that I think we could really work together on with the counties and the SWCDs. And the first one is that capacity issue. And just making sure that the legislators know that all of us have capacity issues, and we need to have capacity to do the work in the state-approved comprehensive watershed plans. The second one is the allocation, so that we continue to get state funding to implement the projects in our comprehensive watershed plan. So this would be the watershed-based implementation funding. And third, working together to enhance education efforts with the general public so that they see value in what we're doing together in those comprehensive watershed plans. All of us agree, none of us are doing enough marketing and storytelling and getting the stories out there. But certainly if we work together and make sure that we're all telling the same stories and just trying to augment all that effort, that will go a long ways. So stay tuned on that also. We are going to meet again next in December and taking a look at legislatively how we can work together as the legislature goes back in session on January 31st. So the next item, resolutions. Just a note about when you will see those. They will be distributed later this week, actually, to watershed administrators. No, next week. Next week. That is correct on my screen. Next week. And then you and your board should be discussing these at your November meetings to prepare for the hearing. So here are the topics. There were 2 resolutions that were submitted to increase the flexibility in open meeting law to perhaps continue the use of interactive technology to have meetings. There is a requirement that comes there's to support a requirement that state agencies must seek review and comment on new or amended water management policies before adoption. So it was disappointing with the watershed-based implementation fund program. Bowser had been gathering input from local governments and everyone for 9-10 months, but did not put anything on paper that we could see until September. There were some meetings, a 10-day comment period, and then another quick meeting of a committee, and now it's going to the board. And like I said, some of these, I'm still not even quite sure as to what and how that's all going to work. These types of issues need more adequate review and comment. And I think there's at least some members that are frustrated with it enough that they submitted a resolution. So we will be discussing that. As far as Clean Water Fund issues, there were 3 resolutions that address issues here. The first one would be to support those local capacity funds that go to SWCDs to convert those to watershed-based implementation funding. So we will have a discussion about, should the capacity funds come out of the Clean Water Fund? Even the SWCDs don't support that. But then, should we more immediately convert those? Supporting the requirement that only 103B plans are eligible for WBIF. And not the new plans that are being created for the SWCDs. And then a support for rural watershed districts being eligible LGUs for that capacity fund. This was discussed in quite a bit of detail during our committee meeting. How could that, maybe we take a look at the water governments that are hurting the most and direct those funds, the capacity funds, to watersheds or SWCDs, whatever ones have the greatest need. So there's some potential in there. And I think these 3 resolutions will really spark some really good conversation at our annual resolutions hearing. And then the last one is supporting the expansion of crop insurance to include crop losses that occur inside impoundments. Currently, they are excluded. So the last item tonight for my update is the annual conference. The committee met. We've had to readjust. We did decide to move this to an online platform rather than having it in person. Clearly, it was one of probably the toughest decisions we've had to make. Everyone wants to get together. But when we look at the risk and the just the severity of COVID right now, just made the decision that it'd be better that we stay online. The social distancing, as you know, you just can't do it at the Arrowwood, even with masks. I don't know that we can get it done. And I just had a doctor's appointment last week. And the specialist told me that there is not a bed within 400 miles, and that Mankato is bringing folks from Wisconsin, and it's just, it's so sad. And yeah, we want to get out there, but I don't know. And I think about it still every day. Did we make the right decision or not? But every time I personally come back to, I think we did. So, excuse me, registration will open next week. We are looking to reduce the cost to $99 per person. I do believe that just needs a final okay by the mod board. The committee was in favor of that. The schedule will be a Wednesday, Thursday, Friday this year. Wednesday will be our pre-conference workshop. So we're doing the drainage and the watershed management, our two typical ones. And the drainage one's really going to be kind of interesting. It's going to focus on utilities and having conversations and presentations about how do you handle solar farms, wind farms, gas lines, all of those, kind of once in a lifetime thing that crosses your drainage system. How are people handling those? They kind of come in hot and fast, and all of a sudden you're in it. So we're going to be talking about that. Thursday and Friday morning we will have presentations. We'll be running 3 tracks on Thursday and 2 tracks on Friday morning. I'm happy to also let you know that 6 of the Platinum sponsors that give Mod $4,000 each to be a sponsor have agreed this year to also still sponsor us, even though they're really going to have a tough time mingling and interacting with you. But we do have 6 very strong supporters of our mission, so that's fantastic. The regions, the region caucuses, don't write this down. That will be Wednesday. We're going to do that after a pre-conference. We just had a planning meeting. We just changed that. And then Friday afternoon is when we will have our annual business meeting. This will all be on Zoom. Of course, like I mentioned, now we are going to have some fun things, gifts included. If you get your registration in by, I think we're going to set the day of November 15th. We're going to send out some COVID conference survival kits, just some fun things. And so stress balls, different candies that are symbolic of, just to make it a little bit more lighthearted of the situation that we're in. And then if 3 registrations come in per watershed, we're looking to set you up with a login for your watershed to access prior learning, PRYOR. Looks like it got cut off on my picture there, but there are 6,000 different courses in there, from HR, accounting, dealing with people, how to run effective meetings, all those more soft skills. That's an area that sometimes we have a harder time hitting with our curriculum, but this would fill that in. So look for that. And the last item here, Jan Voigt, the retired administrator from Heron Lake Watershed District, is assisting us in the education portion of the conference, and she is also helping me on some other items for now until the end of the year. The mod board did approve for me to get some additional help on a temporary basis, just to kind of get caught up on some things and see how that goes. Lastly, I just want to say a huge thank you to all the committee members. There have been so many committee meetings recently, and many hours put in by you all, and I have listed here the awards committee has been meeting. We have Karen and Grace on that committee. The education committee for Metro members, Mike and Jackie. Events, Rick Sanders, Jackie Anderson, David Ziegler, and Tina Karstens. We've had a couple of meetings where they've helped us out, just really figure out how we can make this a good event for everyone, even though it's less than ideal. The Finance Committee met last week to take a look at the budget. That's Sherry, Jackie, Matt Moore, Mike Kinney. The Resolutions Committee, we had a great meeting there. The members were well prepared in reading the prep work, and we're adding quite a bit more comments this year about what the committee discussed. Sherry's the chair there, and Joe Collins and James Whisker are the other 2 Metro members. Legislative Committee has met recently to set that preliminary platform. Jackie, Sean, Peggy, Doug, and Phil, rock stars, helping us out with that. And we do have a couple of positions open for Metro members. I didn't list the governance committees. They haven't specifically met this last quarter, but there is an opening due to Craig Leiser's death on bylaws and MOP. And the Education Committee could use an extra manager on there from the Metro area. And then a reminder at our Region Caucus that will happen on Wednesday, December 1st. We will have elections for the Board of Director, and then we're going to put an emphasis on making sure that you really identify the folks that are going to help us out throughout the year on these committees, because they are such a pivotal piece of how we lead and decide how the organization is going to move forward. So a huge thank you to all the committee members there. And again, thanks everyone for coming tonight. Feel free to follow up with some questions, and I could relay that back through an email or something to those of you. And again, sorry I can't be with you tonight, but looking forward to seeing you very soon. Thank you.